My name is Thomas, and I'm here to tell you a tale that has haunted my dreams and chilled my bones since the day I set foot on that forsaken bridge in Alabama. Some say it's just an old legend, a story whispered in hushed tones around campfires, but I assure you, every word of it is true. What happened on that bridge defies all explanation, leaving me scarred and shaken to this day. It was a sweltering summer afternoon when I first heard of Hell's Gate Bridge. I had recently moved to the quiet town of Prattville, seeking solitude and a fresh start after a series of personal tragedies. Prattville had the kind of serenity I craved, with its rolling hills, lush forests, and a river that seemed to whisper secrets as it flowed gently through the heart of town. The townsfolk were friendly but reserved, their smiles hiding something deeper, something unspoken. One evening, as I sat on my porch sipping sweet tea, my neighbor, old Man Jenkins, shuffled over. He was a gnarled, wiry man with a shock of white hair and eyes that held the weight of decades. "You ever heard of Hell's Gate Bridge, boy?" he rasped, his voice quivering with a mix of fear and anticipation. I shook my head, genuinely curious. "No, sir." "What's Hell's Gate Bridge?" Old Man Jenkins leaned in close, his breath hot and sour, and began his eerie tale. Back in the late 1800s, when Prattville was a burgeoning town filled with hopes and dreams, they built a bridge to span the river. It was a magnificent structure, wrought iron and stone, with grand arches that reached for the heavens. They named it Hell's Gate Bridge for reasons that would soon become all too clear. The townsfolk were proud of their bridge, gathering there often for picnics and celebrations. But there were whispers of strange happenings in the vicinity. People claimed to have seen shadows moving in the trees, heard eerie whispers on the wind, and witnessed a phantom fog that clung to the river's edge, even on the clearest of nights. One moonless night, a group of young folks decided to test the legends. They gathered at Hell's Gate Bridge, armed with lanterns and nerves of steel. They ventured into the fog that shrouded the bridge's entrance and crossed the dark abyss to the other side. It was there, under the pale glow of the moon, that they made a horrifying discovery. Old Man Jenkins paused, his eyes locked onto mine, conveying a terror that transcended words. He continued his tale. The young folks stumbled upon a crumbling, desolate house, its timbers groaning with malevolence. It stood as a sentinel of evil, a place forgotten by time itself. Inside, they found a diary written by a tormented soul named Eleanor. It spoke of dark rituals, forbidden pacts, and a gateway to the underworld itself, Hell's Gate. Eleanor's words told of an unholy bargain she had struck to save her ailing daughter. She had sacrificed her own soul to the malevolent forces that dwelled beneath the bridge, hoping that her daughter would be spared. But the forces of darkness had their own agenda, and they demanded more. Eleanor's diary described the horrors she witnessed as her daughter's body became a vessel for unspeakable evil. She wrote of writhing shadows, guttural voices in the night, and a darkness that consumed everything it touched. The diary ended abruptly with the words, "I see them, the fiends from below, clawing their way into our world." The young folks fled the house, but the malevolent forces had been awakened. Hell's Gate Bridge became a place of dread, where apparitions roamed and ghostly cries echoed in the night. The townsfolk sealed the bridge, hoping to contain the evil within. Old Man Jenkins' tale sent shivers down my spine, but I dismissed it as an old man's ramblings. A ghost story to entertain a newcomer. That is, until the night curiosity got the better of me. One moonless night, unable to sleep, I found myself drawn to Hell's Gate Bridge. I carried a lantern and a sense of unease as I approached the bridge, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The fog clung to the river's edge, just as Old Man Jenkins had described. I crossed the bridge, the iron groaning beneath my weight. On the other side, I saw it, the crumbling house from the legend. My heart raced as I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The interior was a nightmare of decay and despair. Broken furniture lay in heaps, and the walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with malevolence. And there, on a rotting wooden table, I found it Eleanor's diary. I flipped through its brittle pages, my hands trembling. The words were the same as old Man Jenkins had recounted. A tale of a mother's desperate sacrifice, of a daughter possessed by unspeakable evil. As I read, a cold wind swept through the house, extinguishing my lantern. Panic surged within me as I fumbled to relight it. That's when I heard the faint, agonized cries of a child, echoing from the darkest corners of the house. My heart pounded as I followed the sound, my lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like specters on the walls. The cries led me to a decrepit staircase that descended into darkness. I hesitated, but an overwhelming compulsion urged me forward. Step by step, I descended into the abyss, the cries growing louder and more anguished. The air grew colder, and a putrid stench filled my nostrils. At the bottom of the staircase, I found a chamber, its walls lined with bones, a grisly testament to the horrors that had transpired there. In the center of the room, a flickering, otherworldly light illuminated a figure. It was a child, or what had once been a child. Its skin was pallid and stretched tight over a skeletal frame, its eyes vacant and filled with torment. It writhed on the cold stone floor, its limbs contorting in unnatural ways. I couldn't move, couldn't tear my eyes away from the grotesque spectacle. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from a place beyond this world, the child spoke. "Help me, please," it whispered, its voice a chilling blend of innocence and despair. "I'm trapped in this nightmare." Before I could react, the chamber trembled, and the walls seemed to close in on me. I realized with a sickening certainty that I had become a part of the nightmare, trapped in the same malevolent forces that had plagued Hell's Gate Bridge for generations. I awoke on the bridge, my body drenched in cold sweat. The first light of dawn was breaking, dispelling the darkness that had surrounded me. It took me a moment to gather my thoughts, to convince myself that it had all been a horrific dream. But as I stumbled back to my house, I knew it was no dream. The nightmare had become a part of me, a festering darkness that would haunt me for the rest of my days. Hell's Gate Bridge, with its tales of unspeakable evil and a gateway to the underworld, had claimed another victim. And as I sit here now, recounting this tale, I can't help but wonder if the bridge's malevolent forces are still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next unsuspecting victim to cross its threshold. So, my friends, heed my warning, stay far away from Hell's Gate Bridge. For once you enter its dark domain, there may be no escape from the horrors that dwell within.